This time we're talking about a 3-star, a 4-star, and a 5-star. Let's talk about them right after the intro. Welcome back to the Dormer. I'm Michael. Glad you can come back and join us. This time on the September wrap-up, only have 3 that we're going to talk about. But sometimes life gets busy and you don't want to force yourself into trying to jam books just to make your numbers look higher. I do this for entertainment and I do it for enjoyment and learning, and yeah, you don't rush that. First one up, a 3-star. So we got 2 physicals, one audio. The audio is a wrap up of a long series, so if you've been with me for a while, you know which one it's going to be. First one is actually a Ukrainian book. So just by that name, and then calling it a 3-star, and I'll just save time. It's really weird. That's probably kicking off a lot of people to know it is Vita Nostra. And I'm going to try it, Marina and Sergey Dyachenko, Ukrainian authors who wrote this in Russian. So several of their books were in Russian. They also wrote in Ukrainian, apparently some in English. They have since moved to the United States, and I believe Sergey has since passed. But 2007 novel, so it was a ways back. The translator is Russian. She lived from Moscow and went to the University of Moscow, and then she has also moved to the United States. So it's a kind of an interesting little how the translator shows up, and they're all now living in an English world. Weird book. Let's just start into it again a little bit here. Not a special edition. I don't think there is a special edition. If there is, it's probably not in English. A lot of psychological thrillers in it, a lot of suspense. I would put horror, even terror in this. Mixed in with, you've got some science fiction, or at least things that seem like science fiction. You have fantasy, which horror, right? I mean, a lot of times horror is playing with some fantasy elements. Sasha's recruited to go off to a special technologies institute. Let's just say, I'm not going to go through most of the plot. She goes to a small town, which is actually one of the reasons I was very happy, because when I found out it was set in a small town, I'm like, I get to use it for bingo. And it was one of those books I've had it for a little while, and people talked about it online. I thought it was, or on forums. I thought it'd be interesting. It's one of those weirdest books. Like, you ever start a book and try to explain it to somebody else? Like, oh yeah, there's this young girl. She's like 16. She's at a beach town with her mom, and some guy is creeping her out, and then tells her he'll stop if she gets naked and swims out to the buoy and touches it and comes back every night. Somehow that she goes, okay. Like, there's a level of like, what the heck is going on here? But it was messing with her dreams. In reality, she probably had no chance, or at least in the story's reality, she probably had no chance. It is a confusing ending. I am debating whether or not just to make another video on it. So if anyone's interested in talking it, let me know, and I'll take the time through it. But it is definitely it's switched up. Like, so there's 3 major parts. Like, there's the beginning where she's at this beach town and she's going through the intro and the weirdness that is going out and touching a buoy, coming back, and then puking up coins, as one does. Then it gets a little weirder. Then she gets to the university. You got a whole section in the university. Then you have as she grows in the university. So it follows her for several years in the university as she gains in skills and powers, and they kept telling her, look, you're not human, you're something else, and she couldn't figure out what they meant by it. It made some sense at the end. Like, as I was reading it through on the first round, I mean, I turned around and immediately reread the ending again. Like, the next day I reread the ending, and I'm like, I think they're trying to do this, but I'm not so certain that it works in English. And if it does, I'm not so certain that I liked it. I think that's probably the bigger thing. I think I finished and went, that's what you did. Huh. All right. My first Ukrainian book that I know of, and it's getting itself 3 stars and getting set over there in the, if I'm ever going to do it again, just to give it a second chance, because it's one of those books that some people seem to love. And I always wonder when you find these people online talking or writing up and going, oh, I love this book, it's so great. Did they just like the confusion, or did they actually understand it? Or was it that you had to read it 2 or 3 times to really understand what was happening, but at the appropriate times as it was being laid out? Yeah, because there were probably some breadcrumbs, but in the end, it just wasn't that enjoyable of a read, and then the ending didn't yank it up greatly to me. The ending probably got it to really is probably about a 3.5, but that's where it's going to be at. Next up, already did a book on this one, just a reaction on this book. Boom. Assassin's Apprentice. First book of the Farseer trilogy, which is the first of Robin Hobb's humongous, what you got, 13 novels in this series? 1995. So taken care of. Oh, and that is the illustrated edition, which is well worth. If you're going to be buying a Robin Hobb's at this point and you don't have the funds for, I don't know, trying to track down to see, a couple of different book groups have done it. I think, I don't know if Subterranean's done it or not, probably. Yeah, I think I would actually take this over the folios. And the folios are, what, $300 for the series? As opposed to $29.99 or whatever it was I paid. I'll put it in the link. Anyways, let's talk about this. This book is the sad adventures of a kid who gets picked on his entire life. All right, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Now, Fitz, he is the bastard child of the king in waiting, so the prince. When he is presented to soldiers who work for the prince, everyone recognizes him because apparently he's a spitting image. It causes the prince to leave, goes off, gets himself killed, probably taken out. All because the wife, who then comes back to help Fitz. I mean, this is just a episode after episode of sadness. There isn't a ton of joy in this book. And I think that's probably what made it a little slower read for me. It took, I think it was 12, 13 days, somewhere in that range. It just was a slower reading book. It's well written. You read it, at no point did I go, oh, that part's bad. There's some parts where they go off and do things that I don't think have any relevance to the plot, but you're experiencing Fitz's life as he's coming from being this 6-year-old or 7-year-old kid up to where he's competent and he's going out as the king's man. Because as the bastard in this, which, funny aside, 1995, you got Game of Thrones right before it with a bastard character, and you've got Assassin's Apprentice with a bastard character. They're both, Jon Snow and Fitz. He gets it recruited by the king's assassin to learn the trade. He could have been really good at a scribe. He was going down the scribe path. It looked like that was what was going to happen for him. But by working for the king and being a valuable asset, it reduces the risk of having the bastard around. And then there's other rivals to the throne, full-on children of the king, who may or may not enjoy having a bastard around. Because, yeah, he does have a claim, and throughout history you see it. But this is just a tale of a kid being shunned. Interesting world. There are these raiders coming in from another kingdom who say, if you pay us, we will kill the hostages we took. If you don't, we return them. And they return as these like weird magical ghosts. Like they have somehow been to where they have almost no sympathy, no capability to really function in a society other than to be violent and mad. That's Assassin's Apprentice. It's good enough. I'm going to continue with that series. So we'll get to it. I don't know when. Probably not. Probably not in 2024. Maybe 25. It'll make an appearance again. Last up, and this is the last. This is book 10 of the 10 book series. Is the main part. Right, the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is the Crippled God, 2011 by Canadian Stephen Erikson. I would say my favorite fantasy series of all time. It is every mix, every emotion. It's a running gag on our fantasy, on Reddit fantasy, that if you bring up and go, I want a book that does this, somebody says Malazan. Because other than coziness, you have it. In fact, you might be able to argue. I'm reading Legends and Lattes. Malazan had a tea shop. They had people opening a bar and having a happy little place and a happy little establishment. Didn't go well. Yeah, spoiler. But this is Malazan. Huge, huge scale, huge number of characters, huge number of point of view characters, much less named characters. I mean, that is just gobs. And things that started in book 1 come into fruition in book 10. I did the audio series. Now I know people always say don't start with the audios. Well, the reason I did start with the audios is one, well, I started with a couple, I was going to listen to it. And two, I'm waiting on the broken binding editions, the physicals to show up. And the first 3 are supposed to be the end of this year, beginning of next year. Then you've got a wait till midsummer, probably till next fall for the middle part, and then probably the year after. Right? It's probably going to be a 3-year run to get through the 10 novels. There are more. There are more by Stephen, and there are more by the universe co-creator. So wow. Obviously, I'm not going to go through it at this point. Like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a spoiler version, book by book, once the physicals come in. So I read the books and give this is what's actually happening and what I figured out. The physicals, I think the thing that's going to be the biggest is just there's so many named characters, it's hard to keep them straight. And some of them sound very close. I'm sure in writing, you look at it and go, oh yeah, I can see the difference. But hearing it, especially where you're doing things, right? I mean, I'm not one of those people who can sit and just listen to an audiobook. I got to be doing something. My hands have to be working or the feet have to be working. So I probably have some of those mixed up. But having seen enough reviews of people who read it and talking about how they also were a little confused about what's going on, right? It's a master class in giving you information when you need it, not preloading it. A master class in giving you characters that you know things are probably going to go bad for, but you still care and you can still actually feel hurt when bad things do happen. And you feel happiness when things work out for them. So yay when they finish off the super evil bad guy. Man, it kind of gives you some sense. Crippled God itself, this book was great. Now, really, book 9 and book 10 are really half of one, half of the other. Like, they're really first and second halves of the same story. Beginning of book 9, there's, at least in the audio, there's a piece where Stephen Erikson begs your apology because he says that's what he's doing. That they're going to be one big book. Wow. But Crippled God, man, they may have saved the best book for last. And he had everything. You still have the humor, because that's one of those things. We're going to write dark, and this is dark. This is war. This is people trying to kill gods, gods trying to kill people, people trying to kill other people, different species that are just horrible to each other. And yet you have humor throughout it. You know, a lot of gallows humor, which is something missing. If you just read like grimdark for grimdark with none of the humor, I don't think it's accurate. And soldiers in a trench will come up with jokes for themselves and things that they find humorous, and like a pet they'll take care of, things like that. And they're still humans, and they're still going to find something. And it's nice when they bring it out, make it relatable. Whole series, amazing. I'm giving the Crippled God 5 stars. That was ended, and I'm like, wow, that was great. I am so glad there's more books in the series, because otherwise I'd have been super sad when that ended. And the entire series, not only 5-star, I'm ranking it first. I'm ranking it top tier, boop, 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 above every other. I'm tempted to put it above every other series I've read, much less every other fantasy. Yeah, it just rocks. And I'm glad to know there's a couple more years if I want to keep going on the other parts, right? The other sub pieces. All right, so that was 3 books. I'm recording this on the 12th. There's been some things I had to prep for work and life and Halloween decorations and whatnot. So I've already caught up. It's like, I think probably tomorrow, the next day, I will finish book 3 of the month already. So I'm doing a little faster. By the way, these Malazan books, what I was talking about, that was 45 hours. And I think the last 7 or 8 books are 45 hours a shot. And if I like a narrator, I'm not fast forwarding. I know some people like to put in, go to 1.8 and just get the story. if I like the narrator, that's part of the performance I'm after. Yes, I mean, same thing on books, physicals. I can skim read, but I want to read. And if I have to skim read, it better be a book I'm reading for something other than me. Better be like a workbook. All right, let's go to the magnets real fast. All right, before we let you go, finish off the bingo board. Again, our fantasy bingo from Reddit, 25 prompts, unique author for each one required. There is hard modes, which really kind of focus you in on different types of reading, different types of books. I've got 16 done. This actually starts in April, so this is halfway through, and I've got 16 of the 25 done. So we're doing okay. I was really kind of hoping to get done by the end of the year. It might go into January at this point. Who knows? I only got 2 instead of getting 3 this month. It happens. Again, this is a hobby, so I'm not going to stress too much about it. Let's get them up here, though. First off, Assassin's Apprentice, and it hits published in the 90s. Hard mode, the author or one of the authors has to have published in the last 5 years. Robin Hobb is still writing. She is mostly writing short stories. But I am, boom, I had to put it on upside down. Like I said, boom. Maybe I should line these up so they look pretty. All right, that's one row done. But unlike regular bingo, I didn't just win. You got to do them all. In fact, we're going to the far corner and actually completing another row. So we're going to do the part here because Vita Nostra is actually set in a small town. It's set in a small town. The hard mode for this is that the small town can be fictional, but the world has to be real. It is actually set in our world. It is definitely set in Ukraine. So we are popping it in there. And that's this round. Currently, I'm actually reading ones that will nail both that and that. So I think I'm going to do a pretty good round of it next month. At least 3. And then we'll run from there. Again, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.